He hadn't planned to cry in the middle of the boardroom. Not in front of the woman who once shattered his pride with a single decision. Not in front of the same CEO who now stood just a few feet away from him, her voice softer than he had ever heard it before, asking the one question he never expected to hear. "Still upset with me?" Those 4 words carried the weight of months of silence, sleepless nights, and sacrifices no one in that building knew about. His answer, when it finally came, didn't just change her, it changed everything. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of forgiveness, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories like this. Your support keeps these stories alive. Daniel Harris had never imagined his life would narrow down to 2 things: his 6-year-old daughter Mia and the job that barely kept the lights on. 2 years earlier, his world had been whole. He had a wife who laughed loudly at bad jokes, a small rented house filled with warmth, and dreams that felt possible. Then came the hospital corridors, the sterile smell of disinfectant, and the slow, unbearable goodbye to the woman who had been his partner in everything. After she passed, grief didn't give him time to breathe. It demanded rent. It demanded school fees. It demanded groceries. So Daniel folded his pain into neat, invisible layers and went back to work at the corporate headquarters of one of the city's fastest-growing tech firms. He was just a mid-level operations manager, replaceable in the eyes of most executives. But to him, that paycheck was survival. The CEO, Olivia Grant, was known throughout the building as brilliant and untouchable. She had built the company from a struggling startup into a powerhouse before she turned 35. Her name alone carried authority. She walked through the halls like she carried the weight of every decision on her shoulders. And maybe she did. Employees admired her from a distance, feared her up close, and rarely saw anything beyond her sharp focus and perfectly tailored suits. Daniel had always respected her, but respect didn't prepare him for the day everything collapsed. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. The company had just lost a major client, and rumors of restructuring spread like wildfire. Daniel had been called into a meeting with HR and 2 senior executives. The words budget cuts and downsizing echoed in his ears, but what he heard most clearly was, "Your position has been eliminated." He remembered sitting there, hands clasped tightly, thinking of Mia's small backpack by the door at home. He thought of her asking if he would still make it to her school recital next month. He thought of the bills already stacked on the kitchen counter. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded and walked out with a box of his belongings. What hurt the most wasn't losing the job. It was seeing Olivia through the glass walls of her office as he left. She had signed off on the restructuring plan. She hadn't looked up as he passed by. The weeks that followed tested him in ways he never expected. Savings drained faster than hope. Job interviews came and went, each ending with polite rejection emails. He began driving for a delivery app at night after putting Mia to bed. Sleep became a luxury he could not afford. Some mornings he would watch his daughter eating cereal at the tiny kitchen table and force a smile, promising himself she would never feel the fear he carried. One rainy evening, while waiting for a food order outside a restaurant, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was the company's HR department. They wanted him to come back in for a meeting. There was a temporary consulting opportunity, short-term, tied to a new internal project. It wasn't permanent, it wasn't guaranteed, but it was something. He almost said no. Pride told him to refuse. But Mia's voice asking for new school shoes echoed louder. When he stepped back into the building a week later, it felt smaller and colder. People glanced at him with curiosity, whispering quietly. He wasn't an employee anymore. He was a contractor, a temporary fix. He kept his head down and focused on the project assigned to him, restructuring internal logistics to reduce operational waste. Ironically, it was the very inefficiency that had partly justified his layoff. Late nights returned, but this time he wasn't alone in the building. Olivia often worked past midnight. On several occasions, their paths crossed in the hallway. She would nod politely, and he would respond with the same restrained courtesy. Neither mentioned the past. Then came the crisis. The company's new product launch began unraveling after a major technical failure. Investors panicked. Media outlets questioned leadership. Employees whispered about instability. Daniel, reviewing data late one night, noticed something others had missed, a chain reaction triggered by a supplier oversight months earlier. It was fixable, but only if addressed immediately. He compiled a detailed report and sent it up the chain of command. No response. Knowing the urgency, he made a choice that could cost him the contract. He walked straight into the executive floor and requested an immediate meeting with Olivia. She looked exhausted when he entered her office. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked human. He laid out the evidence calmly, pointing to projections, timelines, and solutions. He didn't accuse, he didn't criticize, he simply focused on the fix. She listened without interrupting. Within 48 hours, the corrective measures were implemented. The crisis stabilized. Investors regained confidence. The media storm faded. The board praised Olivia's decisive leadership. No one mentioned Daniel. He didn't expect applause. He didn't need recognition. He just needed the contract to continue long enough to secure stability for Mia. But something shifted after that night. Olivia began asking for his input in strategic meetings. She valued his grounded perspective, his attention to detail. She noticed the way he always left exactly at 6 on Fridays, never earlier, never later. One evening, as they exited the elevator together, she finally asked why. He hesitated but answered honestly. It was the only night he could guarantee being home in time to cook dinner and watch a movie with his daughter. It was their ritual. No matter how tired he was, no matter how heavy the week had been, Friday nights belonged to Mia. Something in her expression softened. Days later, she requested a private meeting. Daniel assumed it was about extending his contract. Instead, she surprised him. She apologized. Not in corporate language, not as a strategic move, but as a person. She admitted she hadn't personally reviewed the list of layoffs during the restructuring. She had trusted her executive team's analysis and signed off under pressure from the board. When she later learned about his situation as a single father, it had weighed on her more than she let on. Daniel listened quietly. Anger flickered inside him, but so did exhaustion. He had carried resentment like armor, believing it protected him. Now, standing in front of her vulnerability, that armor felt heavy. Weeks passed. The company stabilized. The temporary contract was nearing its end. Daniel had already begun applying elsewhere, preparing for another uncertain chapter. Then came the boardroom meeting. The executive team gathered to discuss long-term restructuring and leadership appointments. Daniel had been invited to present final recommendations. He spoke confidently, presenting data-driven strategies that would strengthen operational resilience and prevent future crises. When he finished, silence filled the room. Olivia stood slowly, eyes fixed on him, and asked the question that cracked open everything. "Still upset with me?" It wasn't a challenge, it wasn't sarcasm, it was raw. Every executive turned toward him. Months of pride, humiliation, gratitude, and confusion collided inside his chest. He could have said yes. He could have reminded them all of the nights he drove through rain delivering food while his daughter slept alone. He could have listed every rejection, every bill, every moment he questioned his worth. Instead, he took a breath and chose something harder. He said he had been upset, he had been angry and hurt. But he also said that losing the job had forced him to confront parts of himself he had neglected. It pushed him to become more adaptable, more resilient. It showed his daughter what perseverance looked like. And if he was honest, he said, the experience taught him that leaders are human too, capable of mistakes, but also capable of growth. He told her he didn't want revenge or validation. He wanted stability, purpose, and the chance to build something meaningful. The room was silent again, but this time it felt different. Lighter. Olivia didn't speak immediately. When she did, her voice carried conviction. She announced the creation of a new executive role, Director of Operational Strategy, and offered it to Daniel, effective immediately, as a permanent position with full benefits. Gasps circled the table, but she wasn't finished. She also unveiled a new company policy, a comprehensive support initiative for single parents and employees facing personal crises, flexible hours, emergency funds, and leadership review protocols to ensure no restructuring decision ignored the human story behind each name. She said the company had nearly collapsed because it forgot its people, and she thanked Daniel for reminding them. That night, Daniel walked through his front door holding more than a job offer. He held a shift in perspective. Mia ran into his arms, asking why he was smiling so wide. He lifted her high, laughing for the first time in months without forcing it. They celebrated with homemade pancakes for dinner. In the weeks that followed, Daniel stepped into his new role with humility. He didn't seek power, he sought impact. He met with employees across departments, listening to their concerns. He advocated for transparency and compassion in decision-making. Slowly, the culture began to change. Olivia changed too. She became more present, more engaged beyond numbers and charts. She invited feedback, even when it was uncomfortable. The distance between leadership and staff narrowed, and one afternoon, months later, she passed Daniel in the hallway and offered a quiet smile. No tension, no unspoken resentment, just respect. Before this story ends, if it touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories about resilience and hope. Your engagement truly helps these messages reach others. And here's a special request. Comment below the word forgiveness if you believe that second chances can transform lives. Daniel once thought losing his job was the end of his stability. Instead, it became the beginning of something deeper, not just career growth but emotional strength. He learned that forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it redefines it. Olivia learned that leadership without empathy is incomplete, and a little girl named Mia learned that even when life knocks you down, you can stand up stronger. The question, still upset with me? Could have reopened wounds. Instead, it opened a door, and sometimes all it takes to change everything is the courage to answer honestly.